Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Ghosts of the Past. Callum Navarro never asked to be a hero. At 42, the former Special Forces operator had spent the last 23 months deployed on a classified mission in Yemen that officially didn't exist. The Pentagon called it advisory work, but Callum and his team had been hunting high-value targets with extreme prejudice. It was his fourth deployment in 8 years of marriage to Brianna, but this one had been different, longer, darker, and far more isolating. 3 months into the deployment, comms had been compromised. To protect operational security, all contact with families was severed. For the remaining 20 months, Callum's team was presumed missing or dead. They endured, completed their mission, and returned as ghosts. Callum fingered the faded photograph in his wallet as the military transport touched down on American soil. In it, his wife's auburn hair caught the light, and their daughter Sophia, 15 when he left, smiled with her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin. The photograph was creased and worn, stained with sweat and sand and blood. Not all of it his own. "You gonna call ahead, Nav?" asked Trent Walsh, the youngest member of their team, as they collected their gear. Callum shook his head. "Want to surprise them. It's 3 days before Christmas. Perfect timing." Sergeant Major Griffin Mercer, Callum's oldest friend and confidant, exchanged a glance with Trent. "Just be careful with expectations, brother. It's been nearly 2 years of radio silence. People adjust. Breathe strong," Callum said with quiet confidence. She understood what she signed up for. Griffin nodded, but didn't quite meet Callum's eyes. "I'm just saying, take it slow. They thought you were dead, man." Before deploying, Callum had made arrangements to ensure his family would be taken care of if the worst happened. His military pension and life insurance would provide security, but he'd also set up a separate account where his hazard pay accumulated. Every month, a portion transferred automatically to their joint checking account, his way of supporting them even in absence. At 39, Brianna had been running her interior design business while raising their daughter. They had been high school sweethearts, married young, and weathered the storms of military life together. The modest 2-story colonial in Virginia had been her dream home, bought with their combined savings 6 years ago. As the taxi approached his neighborhood, snow began to fall. Christmas lights adorned most houses, and Callum felt a knot forming in his stomach. He'd missed 2 birthdays, a graduation, countless dinners, and everyday moments that could never be recovered. "Just here is fine," he told the driver, deciding to walk the last block. The night air bit his face as he trudged through fresh snow, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He passed the Henderson place, where old Floyd was arranging a light-up reindeer, and Mrs. Keller's house with its meticulously decorated windows. I didn't notice him. He moved like a shadow, a habit hard to break. When his house came into view, Callum stopped. There were unfamiliar decorations, not Brianna's usual tasteful white lights, but multicolored strands haphazardly hung. A new car sat in the driveway, an expensive European model he didn't recognize. The knot in his stomach tightened. He approached slowly, noting the changed curtains, the different welcome mat, small details that felt wrong. Through the front window, he could see a Christmas tree far larger than Brianna ever preferred, decked in gaudy ornaments. Callum stood at his own door, suddenly feeling like an intruder. He took a deep breath and rang the bell. 30 seconds passed. Footsteps approached. The door swung open, and there stood Brianna, her hair shorter, highlighted differently, wearing an elegant dress he'd never seen. Her eyes widened in shock, color draining from her face. "Callum," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hi, Bree," he said, his throat constricting. "I'm home." Brianna's expression shifted from shock to something else. Panic? Her eyes darted behind her, then back to him. We thought you were dead," she stammered. "I know. I'm sorry about that. It was classified," she finished. "Of course." An awkward silence stretched between them. No embrace. No tears of joy. Just distance. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. Brianna stepped halfway outside, pulling the door nearly closed behind her. "Callum, I don't think that's a good idea right now. You should have called." Call. Confusion and hurt crossed his face. "Bree, it's me. It's our home." She shook her head, eyes now avoiding his. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong address." The words hit harder than any bullet ever had. Callum stared at his wife, uncomprehending. Behind her, he caught a glimpse of movement, a man's silhouette passing in the hallway. Understanding dawned cold and clear. "I see," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm that anyone who'd served with him would have recognized as a warning. "My mistake." He turned and walked away, feeling her eyes on his back. He didn't look back, even when the door closed with a quiet click behind him. The snow was falling harder now as Callum walked aimlessly through the neighborhood. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a new phone with only military contacts. The number wasn't one he recognized. "Hello, Dad." Sophia's voice, deeper than he remembered, broke slightly on the word. "Sophia," he breathed. "How did you—" "Mom just called me," she interrupted. "I can't believe you're alive." "Where are you?" "Walking around the neighborhood," he answered honestly. "Your mother didn't seem too happy to see me." A pause. "Don't be upset, but you know we couldn't let you in." The plural wasn't lost on him. "Understood. It's complicated," Sophia continued. "Can we meet tomorrow? Talk properly?" "Of course," Callum agreed, his mind racing. "Where are you now?" "I'm at college, but I'm coming home tomorrow for Christmas break. Let's meet at Riverside Park at noon." "I'll be there," he promised. "I should go." I'm glad you're alive, Dad." As she hung up, Callum heard her voice, muffled as if she'd pulled the phone away too late. "He still thinks helping with rent means he's automatically included." The words struck like physical blows. His daughter hadn't just forgotten to hang up. She'd wanted him to hear. The cruelty was deliberate. Callum stood motionless in the falling snow, processing this second betrayal. The man who'd survived firefights, torture, and months of isolation felt something breaking inside him. Not his heart, his restraint. With mechanical precision, he pulled out his phone again. First, he canceled all automatic transfers to the joint account. Second, he logged into his credit card portal and removed Brianna as an authorized user. Third, he called his bank and placed a freeze on all shared accounts. By morning, they would understand what they had lost. By morning, he would be someone else entirely. The man who died in Yemen and returned as something harder, colder, and utterly unforgiving. As he walked away from the life he'd once known, Callum's phone lit up with notifications. 31 missed calls and counting. It was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Scorched Earth. Callum spent the night at a budget motel on the outskirts of town, a sparse room with peeling wallpaper and a mattress that had seen better decades. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat methodically cleaning his K-bar knife, a habit that focused his mind. By dawn, his plan was taking shape. The calls and messages continued through the night. Brianna's voice grew increasingly desperate. "Callum, please call me back. You don't understand. Then, this isn't what you think. Finally, you can't just cut us off like this." But he could, and he had. At 7 a.m., Callum called Griffin. "Jesus, Nav, I've been worried sick." "Where are you?" "Need a favor, Griff." "No questions." A pause. "Name it. Your cousins still work at First Virginia Bank?" "Vince?" "Yeah, he's a VP now. I need everything on Brianna's accounts. Joint and personal. Last 2 years. Today." Griffin whistled low. "That bad?" "Worse," Callum replied. "And I need to borrow your cabin. Just for a week. It's yours for as long as you need. Keys are in the usual spot. Nav, whatever happened, I'm sorry, brother." By 10 a.m., Callum had established a new bank account, redirected his military pension, and filed paperwork to liquidate certain investments, ones Brianna didn't know about. By 11 a.m., he'd visited a lawyer recommended by another team member, initiating divorce proceedings with specific instructions. No settlements, no mercy. At 11:45, he arrived at Riverside Park. The snow had stopped, leaving the landscape pristine and silent. He chose a bench with clear sight lines and waited. Sophia arrived at 12:07. At 17, she was taller than he remembered, her posture confident as she scanned the park. She'd grown up while he was fighting someone else's war. The realization brought a pang of regret that he quickly suppressed. "Dad," she said, approaching cautiously. She didn't move to embrace him. "Sophia," he replied, gesturing to the space beside him. She sat, leaving distance between them. "You look different." "So do you." He studied her face, the expensive highlights, designer coat, the iPhone 16 Pro clutched in her manicured hand. "Seems you've done well for yourself." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just an observation." "Look," she said, exhaling sharply, "about what happened yesterday. About what I overheard." Callum interrupted, his voice calm but cold. "That I'm just an ATM to you?" Sophia flinched. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "Clearly. It's not what you think." She shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's been through hell. We both have. You disappeared for almost 2 years, Dad. What were we supposed to do? Mourn me? Remember me? Keep faith?" Each question delivered without emotion. "Instead, you replaced me. It's not that simple." Her composure cracked. "Nelson has been there for us. He helped Mom when she was falling apart. He paid for my college when the military benefits got held up. Where were you?" "Fighting to stay alive so I could come home to my family," Callum replied. "A family that apparently doesn't exist anymore." Sophia's expression hardened. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," he agreed. "None of this is fair. But it is what it is." He stood, brushing invisible dust from his pants. "I've canceled the supplemental rent payments and credit cards. The joint accounts are frozen pending legal separation." "What?" Sophia stood too, panicked. "You can't do that. Mom needs that money. I need that money for next semester." "Nelson can cover it," Callum replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Since he's been there for you." "Dad, please." Her tone changed, softening into the voice of the little girl who used to ask for ice cream. "I know you're upset, but this is extreme. We can work something out." Callum looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and saw the calculation behind her eyes. The same calculation he'd seen in enemies trying to manipulate their way out of tight situations. "There's nothing to work out," he said finally. "You and your mother made your choices. Now you get to live with them. So that's it. You're just cutting us off." Tears welled in her eyes. Genuine or tactical, he couldn't tell anymore. "No, Sophia. You cut me off when you decided I was nothing more than a paycheck." He turned to leave, then paused. "Tell your mother divorce papers are coming. I suggest she get a lawyer." As he walked away, Sophia called after him. "You don't understand what we've been through. This isn't fair." Callum didn't look back. In war, he'd learned there was no fair, only survivors and casualties. By afternoon, Griffin's cousin had delivered 2 years of bank records, credit card statements, and financial summaries. The picture they painted confirmed Callum's worst suspicions. 3 months after his deployment, coinciding exactly with the communications blackout, large cash withdrawals began. Designer purchases, expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to the Hamptons. A pattern emerged. Brianna had started spending lavishly almost immediately after believing him dead. Most damning was a joint investment account, emptied 6 months ago. $300,000, transferred to a new account in Brianna's name alone. Callum's phone continued buzzing with calls and messages from both Brianna and Sophia. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the name that appeared repeatedly in the transaction records: Nelson Bradford. Restaurant charges for 2. Jewelry purchases from high-end retailers. First-class airline tickets. A quick internet search revealed Nelson Bradford was a real estate developer with connections to local politicians. 52 years old, divorced twice, no children. Country club memberships, charity galas, a penthouse downtown, and a beach house in the Outer Banks. "Found you," Callum murmured, saving the information to a secure folder. That evening, as Callum drove to Griffin's remote cabin in the Virginia mountains, his phone finally stopped ringing. In its place came a single text from Brianna. "You've made your point. Let's talk about this like adults." Callum deleted it without replying. There would be no negotiation, no reconciliation. Only consequences. At the cabin, He unloaded his few possessions and a case of supplies Griffin had left. The isolation felt familiar, comforting even. Here, surrounded by wilderness, he could think clearly. On the wooden table, he arranged his materials: bank statements, property records, background checks, maps. For 3 days, he would study his targets, identify vulnerabilities, and devise a strategy, just as he had done countless times on deployment. The military had taught Callum patience and precision. His enemies had taught him ruthlessness. Now, his family would learn what happens when those qualities converged on a single purpose: total devastation. Chapter 3: The Architect of Pain. Griffin's cabin offered the isolation Callum needed. Perched on a wooded slope overlooking a narrow valley, the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Perfect operational security. Over the next 3 days, Callum constructed a detailed picture of the life that had been built in his absence. Nelson Bradford wasn't just dating Brianna. They were engaged. The ring had been purchased 2 months ago, a 3.2-carat diamond from Tiffany's, charged to a card Callum still paid for. Bradford had insinuated himself thoroughly into Callum's former life. He'd helped Sophia get into an expensive private university by making a substantial donation. He'd renovated portions of Callum's house, replacing the kitchen Callum had built with his own hands. He'd even adopted Callum's dog, a German shepherd named Ranger. Most infuriating was the timeline. Bank records, social media posts scraped by software Callum wasn't technically supposed to have access to, and local gossip columns painted a clear picture. Bradford had been in the picture within weeks of Callum's mission going dark. Not months, weeks. This wasn't a case of a grieving widow finding comfort after an appropriate period of mourning. This was opportunistic predation, with Bradford swooping in the moment Callum was presumed dead. On Christmas Eve, as snow blanketed the mountains, Callum's phone lit up with a different name: Thomas Lloyd, his attorney. "Mr. Navarro, we have a situation. Your wife's attorney contacted us. They're seeking emergency spousal support pending divorce proceedings. They filed for an emergency hearing, claiming you've left Mrs. Navarro destitute during the holiday season." Callum almost laughed. Destitute? She's wearing a $15,000 engagement ring from her boyfriend. Nevertheless, they're painting a sympathetic picture. "We need to respond. What do you suggest?" Lloyd cleared his throat. "Ordinarily, I'd advise a reasonable temporary arrangement. But given what you've shared about the joint account that was emptied, we have options." "I'm listening." "We counterfile with evidence of financial impropriety. The $300,000 she transferred? That's misappropriation of marital assets. We demand a full accounting and freeze everything pending investigation." "Do it," Callum said. "And Thomas? No compromises." "Understood. There's something else you should know. A detective, Malcolm Hayes, has been trying to reach you. Apparently, your wife filed a police report claiming you threatened her." Callum stiffened. "That's a lie. I assumed as much. I spoke with him briefly, explained you're a recently returned veteran dealing with a difficult homecoming. He seemed understanding, but would still like to speak with you." "Arrange it," Callum said after a moment's consideration. "After the holidays." When he hung up, Callum stared into the darkness beyond the cabin windows. So they were escalating, attempting to paint him as dangerous, unstable, a disturbed veteran threatening his innocent wife. It was clever, he had to admit, but they'd underestimated who they were dealing with. He opened his laptop and accessed a secure server where Griffin had uploaded additional information. Bradford's financial situation wasn't as robust as it appeared. His development company, Bradford Luxury Properties, was leveraged to the hilt. 3 of his recent projects were stalled due to permit issues. He'd taken out a 7-figure loan against his beach house. Nelson Bradford was house wealthy, but cash poor. A man living beyond his means to maintain appearances. A man desperate to access Brianna's supposedly substantial widow's benefits and Callum's accumulated wealth. "Follow the money," Griffin had written in his notes. "The trust fund brat is running on fumes." By midnight, Callum had formulated phase 1 of his response. It required resources, but fortunately, he had cultivated useful connections during his military career. With 3 phone calls, he set the machinery in motion. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Callum allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Last Christmas, he'd been hiding in a cave in Yemen, surviving on stale rations and rainwater. He dreamed of being home, of Brianna's sugar cookies and Sophia's excitement unwrapping gifts. The memory tasted bitter now. His phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Merry Christmas, brother. Still have room at my table if you want to join." Callum declined politely. Today was for planning, not celebration. At noon, he received confirmation that the first piece was in place. A retired CIA analyst owed Callum for extracting his daughter from a hostage situation in Beirut. That debt was now being repaid with comprehensive surveillance on Bradford and detailed intelligence on his business dealings. By evening, the second piece activated. A former teammate who transitioned to private security now worked for a firm that handled digital reputation management. For the right price, they could also do the opposite, systematically dismantle a person's digital presence. The third call had been to Damian Rivers, a Marine who'd served with Callum on his first deployment. Damian now ran a construction company specializing in government contracts. "How dirty are we getting, Nav?" Damian had asked. "Not illegal," Callum clarified. "Just creative. Bradford has 3 stalled projects needing permits. I want to make sure they stay stalled. Consider done. My brother-in-law works for the County Planning Commission. Paperwork gets lost all the time." As night fell, Callum's phone lit up with a final message from Sophia. Unlike the previous dozens, this one wasn't a demand or accusation. "Dad, I know you're angry, and maybe you have reason to be, but please, can we just talk? Really talk? I miss you." Callum stared at the message, feeling a crack in his resolve. He began to type, deleted it, then typed again. "Actions have consequences, Sophia. You made your choice clear when you thought I couldn't hear you. There's nothing to talk about." He sent it, then powered off his phone. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not if he was going to execute his plan. Tomorrow would begin Phase 2, systematic dismantling of Bradford's financial house of cards. By New Year's, the man would be scrambling to keep his business afloat. By Valentine's Day, his reputation would be in tatters. And Brianna? She would learn exactly what life looked like without Callum's support, the hard way. As for Sophia, her betrayal cut deepest. In time, perhaps she would understand the lesson. Loyalty isn't conditional. Once broken, it can never be fully restored. Callum checked his watch. In 6 hours, the financial trap would spring, triggered by algorithms set to execute precisely at market opening. Bradford's loans would be called in simultaneously by 3 different creditors, all recently acquired by shell companies Callum now controlled. The first domino was positioned. All that remained was to apply pressure and watch the cascade of destruction. Chapter 4. Wolves at the Door. The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in calculated precision. Callum moved from Griffin's cabin to a furnished apartment in Alexandria, paid 6 months in advance under a corporate name. From this secure location, he monitored the unfolding chaos. The financial pressure on Bradford manifested first. 3 of his creditors simultaneously demanding immediate repayment created a perfect storm. Bradford's frantic attempts to secure bridge financing failed as word spread through banking circles that he was a credit risk. Mysteriously, potential investors withdrew interest in his stalled projects. On December 28th, Callum met with Detective Hayes at the police station, accompanied by his attorney. The detective, a former military man himself, seemed skeptical of Brianna's claims from the start. "Mrs. Navarro states that you made threatening remarks and displayed erratic behavior," Hayes said, reviewing his notes. "Detective, I spent 30 seconds on her doorstep before being told I had the wrong address," Callum replied calmly. "The woman I've been married to for 8 years, whose expenses I've covered even while presumed dead, claimed not to know me. I walked away without argument." Hayes nodded, making notes. "She claims you've cut her off financially as retaliation. I froze joint accounts pending divorce proceedings after discovering she'd already emptied our investment account of $300,000, Callum countered, sliding across documents Thomas had prepared. "That's not retaliation. That's self-protection." The detective reviewed the papers, his expression shifting. "I see. and these credit card statements showing charges at the Peninsula Hotel in Tiffany's while you were deployed. Not my purchases, detective. By the end of the interview, Hayes closed his notebook. Mr. Navarro, between us, this complaint appears to be without merit. I'll note that in my report. Thank you, detective. For what it's worth, Hayes added as they stood to leave, my brother served 3 tours. Came home to find his fiancée had moved on after the second. It's a hell of a thing. Callum simply nodded. Sympathy wasn't what he needed, justice was. On New Year's Eve, Phase 2 accelerated. Bradford's company website experienced technical difficulties, replacing professional project photos with images of unfinished construction and disgruntled workers. His business email server suffered a catastrophic failure, with messages from the past year accidentally forwarding to clients and competitors. When Bradford attempted damage control, he discovered his social media accounts had been compromised. Nothing obvious, no crude hacks or embarrassing posts. Instead, subtle alterations to past statements made him appear dishonest in business dealings and disrespectful toward clients. Callum watched it all unfold from his apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand as the year turned. His phone, which he'd finally turned back on, showed 17 new messages, most from Brianna, growing increasingly desperate. Callum, Nelson's business is falling apart. I know you're behind this. Please stop whatever you're doing. You've made your point. We need to talk. Things aren't what they seem. From Sophia, only one message. This isn't just hurting Mom and Nelson. It's hurting me too. Is that what you want? Callum didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he messaged Griffin. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Still with me? Griffin's reply came immediately. All the way, brother. Assets in position. Phase 3 was more personal. On January 2nd, while Bradford was meeting with increasingly nervous investors, a team of movers arrived at Callum's house. Former military men who worked for Damien's company. They had copies of property records and a detailed inventory. Brianna was at work when they arrived. Within 3 hours, they had removed everything Callum could legally claim. Furniture he'd built, artwork he'd collected, family heirlooms from his side. His clothing, personal effects, and most importantly, his military commendations and memorabilia. They even took Ranger, whose microchip registration still listed Callum as owner. When Brianna returned home to a half-empty house, her panic call to Bradford triggered Phase 3's second component. As Bradford rushed from his investor meeting, he was served with papers from the county tax assessor alleging improper property valuations on 3 of his developments. Simultaneously, environmental inspectors arrived at his largest project, citing anonymous complaints about wetland violations. By evening, a reporter from the local business journal was calling, asking for comment on rumors that Bradford Luxury Properties was facing bankruptcy. Callum observed it all via updates from his network. The chaos was unfolding exactly as planned. Pressure applied precisely where Bradford and Brianna were most vulnerable. Not their physical safety, but their security and status. The foundations of a life they'd built on the assumption of his death. On January 4th, Callum finally received the call he'd been anticipating. Mr. Navarro, Thomas Lloyd's voice was triumphant. Mrs. Navarro's attorney has requested an emergency settlement conference. It seems they're eager to discuss terms. No settlement, Callum replied flatly. I want my day in court. Are you certain? Courts generally favor equitable distribution, and given the length of your marriage. I'm not interested in equity, Thomas. I want everything I'm legally entitled to, and I want it documented that she began a relationship while I was deployed and presumed dead. I want it on record that she emptied accounts and used my money to finance a lifestyle with another man. I want it all public. A pause. That's an aggressive approach, Mr. Navarro. That's the only approach I'm willing to consider. After hanging up, Callum checked his surveillance feed. Bradford's beach house was being inspected by yet another county official, this time questioning whether recent renovations had been properly permitted. The noose was tightening. That evening, as Callum walked Ranger in a nearby park, an unexpected figure approached. Sophia. How did you find me? He asked, instantly alert. I put a tracker app on your phone that time you let me borrow it, she admitted. before you deployed. Despite everything, Callum felt a flicker of pride at her resourcefulness. Smart. What do you want, Sophia? She looked thinner than at Christmas, dark circles under her eyes. You have to stop this, Dad. Mom's a wreck. Nelson's business is imploding. My tuition payment for next semester is due, and no one can cover it. That sounds like a series of problems I didn't create, Callum replied, continuing to walk with Ranger heel. Sophia fell in a step beside him. Didn't create? You're systematically destroying their lives. I'm reclaiming what's mine, he corrected. Everything happening to Bradford is the result of his own overextended finances and questionable business practices. I'm simply accelerating the inevitable. And Mom? What did she do to deserve this? Callum stopped walking, turning to face his daughter fully. She replaced me before my body was even cold. She spent my money courting a new life while I was fighting to stay alive. She emptied accounts we built together over decades. When I returned, alive, she pretended not to know me. What would you call that, Sophia? His daughter flinched at the raw emotion finally breaking through his controlled facade. She was heartbroken when they told us you were missing, presumed dead. We both were. Were you? Callum challenged. Because the bank records show the grieving period lasted approximately 2 weeks before the spending sprees began. That's not fair. Nelson was helping us cope. The shopping, the trips, those were his way of distracting us from the pain. Very generous of him, especially since I was paying for it. Sophia's expression hardened. You don't understand anything. I understand enough, Callum replied, his voice cooling again. You should go home, Sophia. Your mother and her fiancé need you. Dad, please, she tried once more. At least unfreeze my college fund. That's not part of this fight. That fund was for my daughter, Callum said quietly. The one who would have waited more than 2 weeks to replace her father. The one who wouldn't have let another man move into his house before the official notification of death was even issued. The one who wouldn't have referred to him as an ATM when she thought he couldn't hear. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. I made a mistake. One stupid comment. Does that erase 17 years of being your daughter? For a moment, Callum wavered. Then he remembered her voice, cold and calculating. He still thinks helping with rent means he's automatically included. Actions have consequences, he said finally. Consider this your first real adult lesson. As he walked away, Ranger trotting faithfully beside him, Callum heard Sophia call after him. You've changed. The father who left wouldn't be this cruel. She was right about one thing. He had changed. The Callum who deployed 2 years ago had died in Yemen. The man who returned was forged in blood and betrayal. A man who understood that mercy was often mistaken for weakness. And he would not be weak again. Chapter 5, Collateral Damage. Mid-January brought bitter cold to Virginia and increasingly desperate countermoves from Bradford and Brianna. Their attorney filed motions to dismiss Callum's financial claims, arguing that Brianna had reasonably believed herself a widow. They sought temporary restoration of accounts pending final divorce settlement. Judge Eleanor Martinez, a no-nonsense veteran of the family court system, denied their motions comprehensively. The evidence indicates Mrs. Navarro began spending marital assets on luxury goods and her paramour within weeks of Mr. Navarro's deployment. Judge Martinez wrote in her ruling. She subsequently emptied a joint investment account without authorization. Until all assets are properly accounted for, the temporary restraining order on financial accounts will remain in place. It was a devastating legal blow. Without access to Callum's funds and with Bradford's business imploding, their carefully constructed life was crumbling. Callum, meanwhile, had moved to the operational phase of his plan. Using his military connections, he arranged a meeting with Senator Howard Blackwood, a powerful member of the Armed Services Committee with oversight of defense contracts. Major Navarro, the senator, greeted him in a private dining room at an exclusive Washington club. Your reputation precedes you. Griffin speaks highly of your team's work. Thank you for meeting me, Senator. I appreciate your discretion. Of course. Griffin mentioned you're dealing with a difficult personal situation while transitioning back to civilian life. Callum nodded. That's part of why I'm here. I understand your committee is reviewing bids for the new military housing contract at Fort Belvoir. The senator's eyebrows rose slightly. We are. A substantial project. Bradford Luxury Properties is among the bidders, Callum continued. I have information suggesting Mr. Bradford has misrepresented his company's financial stability and compliance history. He slid across a folder containing meticulously documented evidence of Bradford's questionable business practices, permit violations, and precarious financial position. This is comprehensive, Blackwood said, reviewing the contents. May I ask your interest in this matter? Mr. Bradford is engaged to my wife, Callum replied evenly. A development that occurred while I was deployed and presumed dead. I believe his interest in the relationship was primarily financial, and I'm concerned about the integrity of someone who would pursue a widow under such circumstances. I see. The senator closed the folder. Rest assured, the committee values integrity in its contractors. This information will receive proper consideration. 2 days later, Bradford Luxury Properties was eliminated from consideration for the $40 million contract. The news made the business section of the Washington Post, with anonymous sources citing character and financial stability concerns. The fallout was immediate. Bradford's remaining investors began withdrawing support. A bank called in loans on 2 of his commercial properties. Subcontractors, sensing trouble, filed liens demanding payment. Callum monitored it all from his apartment, where he'd established a command center of sorts. Ranger lay at his feet as he reviewed updates from his network. The German Shepherd had readjusted to Callum quickly, as though the 2 years of separation had never happened. His phone rang. Griffin. Bradford's in serious trouble, his friend reported without preamble. My banking contact says he's trying to secure emergency financing using the beach house as collateral, but no one's biting. Too much smoke around his business now. Good, Callum replied. There's more. Brianna was put on unpaid leave from her design firm. Apparently, some of her clients were Bradford's investors, and they're jumping ship. That news gave Callum pause. He hadn't directly targeted Brianna's career. Collateral damage, he murmured. Yeah, well, there's more collateral incoming. Sophia dropped out of college yesterday. Couldn't make tuition payment. That information landed differently. Despite everything, Callum hadn't intended to derail his daughter's education. She made her choice, he said, more to convince himself than Griffin. She aligned with them. True, Griffin acknowledged. Just thought you should know. Phase 4 still a go. Callum hesitated, then steeled himself. Yes, execute as planned. Phase 4 was the most personal attack yet, targeting the wedding Bradford and Brianna had scheduled for Valentine's Day. A garish affair at the Westfield Country Club, with 200 guests and extensive media coverage planned for the society pages. Within hours, the club manager received documentation of Bradford's financial troubles along with news articles questioning his business practices. By evening, he called Brianna to regretfully inform her that they would need additional financial guarantees to proceed with the event. Simultaneously, the florist, caterer, and rental companies received anonymous tips that payment might not be forthcoming. One by one, they called to request deposits immediately or cancel services. The final blow came when the wedding planner herself resigned, citing ethical concerns after receiving evidence that Brianna's divorce wasn't finalized and that her fiancé was potentially facing bankruptcy. By nightfall, Brianna was frantically calling guests to postpone the wedding. The society columnist who'd planned a feature spread instead began working on a different angle. Local developers fall for grace. That evening, Callum's doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence since few people knew his temporary address. Through the security camera, he saw a woman he didn't recognize, mid-30s, professionally dressed, with a determined expression. Mr. Navarro, she called. My name is Vanessa Chun. I'm Nelson Bradford's sister. We need to talk. Intrigued, Callum opened the door but blocked the entrance. How did you find me? I hired a private investigator, she replied straightforwardly. May I come in? This conversation should be private. After a moment's consideration, Callum stepped aside. Ranger watched the visitor warily as she entered. Beautiful dog, she commented. German Shepherd? They're loyal to a fault. "What do you want, Miss Chun?" Callum asked, not offering her a seat. "I want you to stop destroying my brother," she said bluntly. "Your brother inserted himself into my marriage while I was fighting for my country," Callum replied coldly. "He's experiencing consequences, not destruction. Is that what you think this is? Justice?" She laughed humorlessly. "You have no idea what actually happened. I know exactly what happened. I've seen the bank records, the purchases, the timeline." Vanessa shook her head. "You've seen transactions and dates. You haven't seen the full picture." "Enlighten me," Callum challenged, crossing his arms. "Nelson met your wife at a charity function for veterans' families," she began. "He was a donor. She was organizing it for families of missing servicemen. They weren't romantically involved for months. He was helping her navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of getting benefits when you were classified as missing rather than confirmed dead. The spending started 2 weeks after I deployed," Callum countered, "because Nelson was trying to help a grieving woman and her daughter." Vanessa insisted. The shopping trips were his attempt to distract Sophia, who was falling into depression. The weekends away were support group retreats for military families. "And the $300,000 from my investment account?" Callum asked sharply. "Was that therapeutic too?" Vanessa hesitated. "That was complicated. Brianna needed funds for an opportunity that couldn't wait for the military to process her death benefits." "What opportunity?" Sophia was offered early admission to Princeton. The deposit and first-year tuition were due immediately. The military was still classifying you as missing, not dead. No benefits were flowing. Callum absorbed this information, feeling the first flicker of doubt. "That doesn't explain why your brother moved into my house, why he's wearing my clothes in social media photos, why they're getting married less than 2 years after I supposedly died." "Because they fell in love," Vanessa said simply. "It wasn't planned or malicious. It happened gradually, over months of shared grief and recovery. Nelson helped put their lives back together when they were shattered." "How convenient for him," Callum replied, unmoved. "And now I'm supposed to walk away while they enjoy the life built with my money?" "No one is asking you to walk away from what's rightfully yours," Vanessa countered. "But this scorched earth campaign isn't just hurting them. Nelson employs 63 people who might lose their jobs. Sophia's education is derailed. Is that collateral damage acceptable to you?" The question hit harder than Callum wanted to admit. "Your brother made himself my enemy the moment he moved into my house." "My brother made himself the protector of a family he thought had lost its father," Vanessa corrected. "Was he wrong to fall in love? Probably. Was Brianna wrong to move on? Maybe. But this systematic destruction goes beyond justice into vengeance. They deserve it," Callum insisted, though with less conviction. Vanessa moved toward the door, then turned back. "My brother isn't perfect, Mr. Navarro, but he's not the villain you've constructed. Before you burn everything to the ground, make sure you're targeting the right people for the right reasons." After she left, Callum paced his apartment, Vanessa's words echoing uncomfortably. For the first time since returning, doubt crept in. What if there were explanations he hadn't considered? What if his intelligence was incomplete? He pulled up the file on Sophia's college. Princeton, not the private university he'd initially discovered. The timeline matched Vanessa's story. The $300,000 would cover exactly the first year's tuition, housing, and the required deposit. Then he examined the charity records more carefully. Brianna had indeed organized events for families of missing servicemen. Bradford was listed as a major donor for 3 years running. The weekend trips Callum had assumed were romantic getaways aligned with support group retreats in the locations Vanessa mentioned. Not everything fit this alternative narrative, but enough did to create uncertainty. Had he launched this campaign of destruction based on incomplete information? Had his tactical mind jumped to the worst conclusion because it was trained to identify threats? As dawn broke, Callum made a decision. He called Griffin. "I need everything," he said. "Not just financial records and social media. Personal communications, emails, text messages, everything between Bradford, Brianna, and Sophia for the past 2 years." "That's in a gray area legally, Nav," Griffin cautioned. "I know, but I need the truth." not just fragments. After a long pause, Griffin sighed. I'll see what I can do. But Nav, if you're having doubts, maybe slow down the offensive until we know more. Agreed, Callum replied. Hold phase 5 for now. As he hung up, Callum stared at the wall of evidence he'd accumulated. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider an unsettling possibility. What if he was wrong? Chapter 6, Truth and Consequences. The intelligence Griffin delivered 3 days later was comprehensive. Emails, text messages, private social media communications, a digital chronicle of the past 2 years. Callum sequestered himself in his apartment, methodically reviewing everything, searching for the truth. What emerged was more complex than either narrative he'd considered. The earliest communications confirmed Vanessa's account. Bradford had met Brianna through charity work, offering support and guidance without romantic overtures. Brianna's messages to friends revealed genuine grief, not the calculated opportunism Callum had imagined. But as months passed, the nature of their relationship clearly shifted. Bradford became more present in their lives, stepping into roles Callum had once filled. Texts between Brianna and Sophia showed initial resistance to his increasing presence. Mom, it feels weird having Nelson fix the sink. That was always Dad's job. I know, honey, but we need to accept help where we can get it. By the 8-month mark, Bradford was regularly staying over. Sophia's texts to friends expressed discomfort. Mom's letting him sleep in their bed now. It's like Dad's being erased. The $300,000 transfer did indeed coincide with Sophia's Princeton acceptance, but with a twist Callum hadn't known. Bradford had offered to pay himself, and Brianna had refused, insisting on using family money. Most revealing were conversations after the military officially classified Callum as missing, presumed dead, at the 1-year mark. Bradford had pressed for marriage almost immediately, citing tax advantages and estate planning. Brianna had initially hesitated. It's too soon, Nelson. I still feel married. Brianna, it's been a year. The military has made it official. You need to think about your future, about Sophia's future. The engagement had come 3 months later, coinciding with Sophia's departure for college. The timing wasn't coincidental. Emails between Bradford and his financial advisor showed mounting cash flow problems. Marriage to Brianna, with access to Callum's death benefits and pension, offered a solution. Most damning were recent communications after news of Callum's survival reached them. Bradford's messages betrayed panic rather than joy. What do you mean he's alive? This complicates everything. We need to keep him away until we figure this out. The accounts, the house, we can't lose all that now. Brianna's responses were less calculating, but equally revealing. I can't face him, Nelson. What do I say? That I gave up on him? That I moved on? He'll hate me. Sophia says we need to protect ourselves financially before he can take everything. She's right. He'll be furious. The evidence painted a picture not of malicious conspiracy from the beginning, but of something that had evolved into one. Opportunism masquerading as support, affection intertwined with financial interest. As for Sophia, her communications revealed a young woman caught between loyalty to her father's memory and the security Bradford provided. Early messages showed her grief and anger at the military for losing her father. Later ones demonstrated growing materialism and detachment. Nelson says we should renovate Dad's study into my new bedroom. It's been sitting empty for 6 months. Dad will want me to be comfortable, right? Most troubling were recent exchanges with Brianna after learning of Callum's return. Mom, we need to be strategic. If he's cutting us off financially, we need to paint him as unstable. The PTSD angle could work with the courts. I'll meet with him, try to make him feel guilty about abandoning us. He always caves when I act hurt. Reading his daughter's calculated manipulation of his emotions hit Callum harder than any physical blow ever had. The daughter he'd raised, the child he'd moved heaven and earth to return to, had become a stranger willing to weaponize his love against him. For 3 days, Callum barely left his apartment, absorbing and processing the complete picture. Neither the total betrayal he'd initially believed nor the innocent misunderstanding Vanessa had suggested, but something messier, more human, and in some ways more painful. By the fourth day, he'd reached a decision. He called Thomas Lloyd. "I want to proceed with the divorce, but with modifications to our approach," he instructed. "I'll send over new parameters." Next, he messaged Griffin. "Resume Phase 5, revised version. Target Bradford specifically. Leave Brianna and Sophia out of it." Then he did something unexpected. He called Brianna directly. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Callum, we need to talk," he said. "In person. Alone." "Ah, yes. When?" "Tomorrow. Noon. The bench at Potomac Park where we used to have lunch." The next day was clear but cold, the park nearly empty as Callum arrived early to secure the location. Brianna appeared precisely at noon, bundled in a coat he didn't recognize, her face drawn and tired. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting beside him, maintaining careful distance. "I've spent the last week reviewing communications between you, Bradford, and Sophia." Callum began without preamble. "I know everything, Brianna. Not just what happened, but why and how." Her face paled. "You had us under surveillance?" "I needed the truth. Not your version, not Bradford's sister's version. The unfiltered truth." "That's invasion of privacy," she protested weakly. "And emptying our joint account without my knowledge was theft," he countered. "But we're beyond legal technicalities now." Brianna looked away, watching a distant jogger. "So what happens now? More financial warfare? More sabotage?" "That depends on you," Callum replied. "I'm prepared to be reasonable about the divorce settlement under certain conditions." Hope flickered in her eyes. "What conditions?" "First, complete honesty from this point forward. No more manipulation, no more lies." She nodded slowly. "And I'll release funds for Sophia to return to Princeton. Her education shouldn't suffer because of our failures." "Thank you," Brianna whispered. "But," Callum continued, his voice hardening, "I know about your plan to claim I'm unstable with PTSD. I know Sophia intended to manipulate me emotionally. Any further attempts at manipulation will result in immediate return to full financial restrictions." Brianna had the grace to look ashamed. It was desperate thinking in a desperate time. "It was calculated cruelty," Callum corrected. "And it stops now." "What about the house?" she asked cautiously. "It's legally mine. I paid for it entirely before we married," he reminded her. "You and Bradford have 30 days to find alternative arrangements." 30 days, she gasped. "That's not enough time." "It's 29 more than you gave me when I returned from war," Callum replied coldly. "Consider it generous." Brianna looked down at her hands. "And Nelson? Will you stop targeting his business?" "Bradford made his choices," Callum said, standing. "His future is his own problem." As he turned to leave, Brianna called after him. "I did love you, Callum. For years. Faithfully. Does that count for nothing?" Callum paused, looking back at the woman he'd once built his life around. "It counted for everything. That's why your betrayal can never be forgiven." That evening, Callum sent revised instructions to his attorney. Arrangements for Sophia's tuition to be paid directly to Princeton, reasonable temporary support for Brianna pending final divorce settlement, accelerated timeline for the house transfer. For Bradford, however, there would be no mercy. Phase 5 proceeded as planned. Anonymous tips to the IRS about questionable tax deductions, formal complaints to the state licensing board about permit violations, and the final weapon, evidence of Bradford's attempts to access military benefits intended for a serviceman's widow while knowing that serviceman was still alive. Within 2 weeks, Bradford Luxury Properties filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The beach house was listed for a quick sale. The engagement was quietly ended, with Bradford moving into a rented apartment alone. Brianna, true to the agreement, maintained dignified silence through the proceedings. The divorce was finalized in record time, with terms heavily favoring Callum but not leaving Brianna destitute. As for Sophia, she returned to Princeton for the spring semester, funded by her father but maintaining careful distance. The single text she sent acknowledged reality without attempting reconciliation. "Thank you for the tuition. I understand why things are how they are now. Maybe someday we can talk again." Callum didn't reply. Someday, perhaps. But not soon. Not until the lesson was thoroughly learned. By March, Callum had reclaimed his house, renovating it completely to erase all traces of Bradford's presence. Ranger readjusted to his original home seamlessly, patrolling the perimeter with military precision. The final piece of intelligence came from Griffin in early April. Bradford, financially ruined and professionally disgraced, had left Virginia entirely, relocating to Florida to work for a cousin's struggling real estate office. "It's done," Griffin told him over drinks at their favorite bar. "Total victory. Feel better?" Callum considered the question seriously. "Not better. Different. Clearer. What's next? Back to contracting?" "No," Callum decided. "I've had enough of war. Thinking about consulting. Security sector." Griffin nodded approvingly. "Good feel for your skills. And personally, you going to start dating again?" Callum smiled thinly. "Not anytime soon. Some lessons you only need to learn once." As they raised their glasses, Callum felt no triumph, no vindication, only the quiet certainty that in war and betrayal, there are rarely true victors. Only survivors who learn to live with the scars. Chapter 7. Ghosts of Future Past. Summer arrived with Virginia's characteristic heat and humidity. For months since the divorce finalized, 6 since his return from the dead, Callum had established a new rhythm to his life. Consulting work 3 days a week with a private security firm, training with Griffin at a tactical facility they'd set up together, quiet evenings with Ranger. The house felt different after the renovations. Larger, emptier, but cleansed of painful memories. He'd replaced everything. Furniture, appliances, even the hardwood floors, creating a space that belonged solely to him, unmarked by betrayal. His phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Client meeting tomorrow at 0900. Possible big contract." With a fancy suit, Callum confirmed the appointment and returned to reviewing security protocols for a corporate client. This was his life now. Structured, solitary, secure. If it lacked certain warmths, it also lacked vulnerabilities. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the security camera, Callum saw a face he hadn't encountered in months. Sophia. He hesitated, then opened the door. His daughter stood uncertainly on the porch, looking both familiar and strange. Her hair was shorter, her posture less confident than he remembered. "Dad," she said simply. "May I come in?" Callum stepped aside wordlessly, allowing her into the renovated space. She glanced around, taking in the changes. "You've redone everything," she observed. "Fresh start," he replied, not offering further explanation. "What brings you here, Sophia?" She set her purse down carefully. "I finished my first year at Princeton. Thought you might want to know I made Dean's List." "Congratulations," Callum said with genuine pride, despite himself. "That's impressive." An awkward silence stretched between them. Ranger patted over, sniffing Sophia's hand cautiously before allowing her pet him. "At least someone's happy to see me," she attempted to joke. Callum didn't smile. "Why are you here, Sophia?" "Really?" She straightened, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. "I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies, actually. I'm listening. What I said that day, about you just being an ATM, about not being automatically included, it was cruel and unfair. I was confused and angry, trying to protect the life I thought I had." Callum remained silent, his face unreadable. "The way we treated you when you came home was unforgivable," she continued. "I won't make excuses. I need you to know I'm sorry." "Noted," Callum said, his voice neutral. "Is that all?" Sophia flinched at his coldness. "I've been in therapy this semester, trying to understand why I did what I did, how I could have betrayed my own father that way. And what conclusions have you reached?" She sighed, looking suddenly young and vulnerable. "That I was scared. When they told us you were missing, presumed dead, I couldn't process it." Nelson stepped in, made everything seem okay again. He filled the void so completely that when you actually came back, it felt like you were the intruder, not him. "That doesn't excuse calculating to use my PTSD against me in court," Callum noted. Sophia's eyes widened. "You know about that." "I know everything, Sophia. Every text, every email, every conversation." She looked away, ashamed. "I was desperate and stupid. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you I'm sorry, face to face. Callum studied his daughter, seeing echoes of both the child she had been and the woman she was becoming. Despite everything, blood remained blood. I appreciate your coming here, he said finally. It can't have been easy. Is there any chance, she asked hesitantly, that someday we might have some kind of relationship again? Not like before, I know that's gone. But something. Callum considered her question seriously. That depends on you, Sophia. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. It requires consistent proof of change over time. Understand, she nodded, picking up her purse. For what it's worth, Mom's doing okay. She's back working full-time, living in an apartment in Arlington. I'm aware, Callum replied. His intelligence network still provided regular updates, though he'd stopped actively tracking them months ago. And Nelson moved to Florida, she added. Also aware. Sophia moved toward the door, then paused. My summer internship is in D.C. I'll be around until August. If you want to get coffee sometime, I'd like that. Callum opened the door for her. I'll consider it. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, but it was an opening, small, heavily guarded, but real. After she left, Callum returned to his desk, distracted by the unexpected visit. His phone buzzed with a message from Griffin. Intel update on Bradford. Trouble in Florida. Appears he's running same playbook on another widow. Want details? Callum stared at the message, considering. Part of him, the vengeful, unforgiving part forged in betrayal, wanted to ensure Bradford never recovered, never hurt another family. But another part recognized the toll vengeance had taken on his own soul. The man who'd returned from Yemen had been hard, but not cruel. The man who'd systematically destroyed Bradford had crossed lines he'd once thought immutable. After long consideration, he replied, "Send the information to the widow, anonymously. Let her make her own choice." That evening, as Callum walked Ranger through the neighborhood, he passed families enjoying the summer evening. Children playing, couples talking on porches, normal lives uninterrupted by war and betrayal. Once, he'd been part of such a scene. Now he observed from outside, separated by experiences most civilians couldn't comprehend. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Navarro," he answered crisply. "Mr. Navarro, this is Elizabeth Harmon with Stone Ridge Security Consultants. I understand you're meeting with my company tomorrow." "That's correct," Callum confirmed. "I've been reviewing your credentials and experience. Frankly, Mr. Navarro, we're not looking to hire a consultant. We're looking for a partner." Callum stopped walking. "A partner?" "We've recently acquired contracts requiring expertise in high-risk extraction scenarios and specialized personnel security. Your military background, particularly your last deployment, suggests you're uniquely qualified. We'd like to discuss a more substantial role than initially proposed." "I'm listening," Callum replied, intrigued despite himself. The position would involve significant international travel, building specialized teams, and implementing security protocols for high-value individuals in volatile regions. It's challenging work, Mr. Navarro. Not everyone is suited for it. For the first time in months, Callum felt a spark of genuine interest. "Send over the details. I'll review them before our meeting." After hanging up, he continued walking, turning the opportunity over in his mind. International work meant leaving Virginia, leaving the ghost that lingered despite his renovations. Building new teams meant human connections, controlled, professional, but connections nonetheless. Perhaps it was time, not for forgiveness. He wasn't capable of that, but for forward movement, for creating something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. As he returned home, Callum caught sight of his reflection in the window. Harder, leaner than the man who deployed 2 years ago, with streaks of gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. Life had extracted its price from him. The question was whether he would allow it to take everything. That night, he dreamed of Yemen. Not the firefights or the pain, but the strange moments of clarity that came in the quietest hours of hiding. The understanding that survival wasn't merely physical, but spiritual. That a man could lose everything except his essential self. He woke before dawn, made coffee, and sat on his back porch watching the sunrise. Ranger dozed at his feet, occasionally twitching in canine dreams. By the time he dressed for his meeting with Stone Ridge Security, Callum had reached a decision. He would take the partnership, if offered, would build something new, something entirely his. Not to replace what was lost, but to create what had never existed before. As he straightened his tie, a precise, military motion, Callum acknowledged the truth. The man who'd left for Yemen was gone forever. The man who'd returned might never fully heal from betrayal, but he could choose to be more than its product. That would have to be enough. Chapter 8. Scorpions and Diamonds. The partnership with Stone Ridge Security transformed Callum's professional life. Within weeks, he was traveling to Dubai, establishing protocols for high-net-worth clients navigating political instability. By August, he'd assembled a specialized team for extraction scenarios. Former special operators from 3 countries, each with unique skills and the same uncompromising competence. Elizabeth Harmon proved an exceptional business partner, brilliant, driven, and utterly straightforward. At 45, she'd built Stone Ridge from nothing after leaving the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service. She respected Callum's boundaries and valued his expertise without prying into his personal history. The London contract is confirmed, she informed him one September morning as they reviewed operations in her Washington office. UAE royal family, diplomatic protection during private visit. They specifically requested you lead the detail. Callum nodded, reviewing the parameters. I'll need Fletcher and DS. The principal's daughter is attending meetings at 3 separate locations. Already arranged, Elizabeth confirmed. There's something else. She hesitated uncharacteristically. The advance team reported the principal's wife is bringing her personal interior designer, an American. Something in her tone made Callum look up sharply. Brianna? Elizabeth nodded once. Your ex-wife. I only just discovered the connection. I can reassign the contract, if necessary. Callum considered the implications. It had been 9 months since the divorce, 6 since any direct contact. The wounds had scarred over, if not healed completely. No need, he decided. Professional considerations outweigh personal history. Elizabeth studied him carefully. You're certain? Our reputation depends on flawless execution. My team's performance won't be affected, Callum assured her, his voice steady. We leave Wednesday. 0600 from Dulles, she confirmed. Callum, if you change your mind, there's no shame in that. He appreciated her concern, but dismissed it with a slight shake of his head. Some ghosts you face, others you simply learn to live with. The London operation proceeded with military precision. Callum established security protocols, coordinated with local authorities, and managed rotation schedules with clinical detachment. For 3 days, he successfully avoided direct contact with Brianna, who was overseeing renovations to the family's Mayfair residence. On the 4th day, however, their paths crossed inevitably at a private reception. Callum was surveilling the room from a discreet position when Brianna entered, escorted by one of the royal aides. She wore a simple black dress, her hair styled differently than he remembered. She looked well, prosperous even. She spotted him almost immediately, freezing momentarily before regaining composure. After speaking briefly with her escort, she approached Callum directly. Of all the security firms in all the world, she said with a weak attempt at humor. Brianna, he acknowledged neutrally. You're looking well. So are you. She gestured to his tailored suit. This seems to agree with you more than military life did. Different challenges, same principles, he replied, maintaining professional distance while scanning the room. Your design work brought you here. She nodded. Her Highness saw my portfolio through mutual connections. It's the biggest commission I've ever received. A pause. I didn't expect to see you here. Likewise. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history. Sophia mentioned she visited you. Brianna finally said. That was brave of her. It was, Callum agreed. She's at Princeton for her sophomore year now? Yes. Still on Dean's list. Pride colored her voice. She talks about you sometimes. Callum's earpiece buzzed with an update from Fletcher, providing a welcome interruption. Excuse me, he said, stepping away to respond to the communication. When he returned, Brianna looked more composed. Your job calls. I understand. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, Callum, I'm sorry for how everything happened. Not just when you returned, but before. The choices I made. Callum studied his ex-wife, the woman who had once been the center of his world, now practically a stranger. Life moves forward, Brianna. We all make choices and live with them. Some choices haunt you more than others, she replied quietly. Before Callum could respond, the principal's security detail signaled readiness to depart. I need to go, he said. Brianna nodded. Of course. She started to walk away, then turned back. Nelson remarried, you know, for months after moving to Florida. A widow with significant property holdings. I know, Callum replied. He'd anonymously warned the woman about Bradford's pattern, but she'd proceeded with the relationship anyway. Some lessons people insisted on learning firsthand. You knew, Brianna sighed. Of course you did. You always know everything. Not everything, Callum corrected. Just enough. They parted without further conversation, both returning to their respective roles. The encounter left Callum unsettled, but not shaken. A ghost confronted and found less powerful than expected. That night, in his hotel room, Callum received an unexpected text from Sophia. Mom said she saw you in London. Small world or careful planning? He replied honestly. Coincidence. Professional overlap. Sophia. Dad, I got the summer research grant I applied for. Marine biology program in Belize. Callum felt a flicker of genuine pride. Impressive. You always loved the ocean. Sophia. Remember when you taught me to snorkel in Virginia Beach? I was so scared until you showed me how to clear my mask. The memory surfaced unexpectedly. Sophia, at 8, wide-eyed and determined despite her fear, his patient coaching until she finally relaxed into the experience. Before deployments and betrayals. Before everything changed. I remember, he texted back. You were fearless once you got the hang of it. Sophia, I'm trying to be fearless again. In my own way. The message struck deeper than she could know. Callum considered his response carefully. That's all any of us can do. The London assignment concluded successfully 3 days later. On the flight back to Washington, Elizabeth reviewed their performance metrics while Callum finalized his assessment report. The UAE team requested you specifically for their Qatar operation next month, she noted. Your reputation is growing. Our reputation, Callum corrected. Stone Ridge delivers the results. I'm just one component. Elizabeth smiled, a rare expression from the normally reserved woman. Modest as always, Navarro. But we both know your particular skills are what's driving our expansion. She hesitated, then added, the Qatar operation would require a 4-month commitment on ground. Extended presence, building local teams, comprehensive security architecture. For months, Callum repeated, considering the implications. That's significant. It is, Elizabeth acknowledged. But the compensation reflects the commitment. And frankly, you're the only one with the right experience for this. What about Ranger? Your dog? Bring him. The principal has 3 German shepherds himself. Adores them. Callum found himself strangely tempted. For months away from Virginia, from the lingering ghosts of his past life. For months building something entirely new. I'll need to make arrangements, he said finally. But yes, I'll take it. Elizabeth nodded, satisfied. Good. We'll start preparations next week. She closed her laptop, studying him with unusual intensity. You know, when we first met, I wondered if you were too damaged by whatever happened during your deployment. Too angry to be effective. And now? Callum asked, genuinely curious. Now I think the anger has purpose, she replied thoughtfully. You channel it precisely. That's rare. Controlled application of force, Callum said. Basic tactical principle. Applied to emotion, Elizabeth noted. Also rare. When they landed in Washington, Callum found another message waiting. This one from Brianna. It was strange seeing you in London. Stranger still realizing how much has changed. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you find peace. You deserve that much. He read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Peace wasn't what he sought. Purpose was. And that, at least, he'd found. The Qatar preparation consumed October. November brought Thanksgiving, a holiday Callum had once celebrated with family traditions and warmth. This year, he accepted Griffin's invitation to dinner with his extended family, finding unexpected comfort in the chaotic energy of children and cousins and conversations that required nothing of him beyond presence. "You leave next week?" Griffin asked as they sat on his deck after dinner, nursing glasses of expensive bourbon. "Monday," Callum confirmed. 4 months, possibly extended if the contract expands. Griffin nodded slowly. "Good timing. Virginia winters are hell anyway." "It's not about escape, Griff." "Didn't say it was," his friend replied mildly. "But distance provides perspective. Might not be a bad thing." Callum considered this, watching his breath fog in the November air. "Sophia asked to see me before I leave. Suggested coffee on Sunday." Griffin raised an eyebrow. "You going?" "Haven't decided." "Nav," Griffin said carefully, "your call entirely, but that girl is trying. Harder than most would in her position. After what she did. After what she did as a scared 17-year-old who thought her father was dead and her world was collapsing. Yeah, terrible." Griffin's tone remained gentle despite the challenging words. "Look, I'm not saying fall back into playing daddy like nothing happened. I'm saying maybe consider that punishment without possibility of redemption isn't justice. It's just another form of war." Callum stared into his glass, the amber liquid reflecting the porch lights. "When did you get so philosophical?" "Why, watch my best friend win every battle and still risk losing himself," Griffin replied simply. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Callum had messaged Sophia agreeing to meet at a coffee shop near his house. Neutral territory, public enough for comfort, private enough for conversation. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in jeans and a Princeton sweatshirt that made her look younger than her 19 years. Callum had already secured a corner table and ordered for both of them, remembering her preference for caramel lattes that he hoped hadn't changed. "You remembered," she said with surprise as she sat down. "Some things stick," he replied, studying her carefully. She looked healthier than during her spring visit, less shadowed, more present. "So Qatar," she began. "That sounds fascinating and potentially dangerous." "Calculated risk," Callum said. "Establishing security protocols for diplomatic compounds." Sophia nodded, wrapping her hands around her mug. 4 months is a long time. The work requires it. "Understand," she said, then laughed softly. "Actually, I don't really understand at all. Your world is so different from mine. But I'm trying to." The honesty disarmed him slightly. "Marine biology in Belize," he noted, changing subjects. "That's significant recognition for a sophomore." Her face brightened immediately. "It's amazing. We'll be studying coral reef regeneration techniques. Only 4 students were selected nationally." "You earned it," Callum said with genuine pride. "You always had the brain for science." They talked about her studies for several minutes. Safe territory, uncomplicated by the past. Gradually, Callum found himself relaxing incrementally, remembering the curious child who had always asked questions about how things worked. Finally, Sophia set down her mug decisively. "Dad, I have something to ask you. It's okay if the answer is no." Callum tensed slightly. "Go ahead. Next summer, after Belize, I'm planning to stay in the Caribbean for 2 weeks. Just decompression time. There's this little island near St. Thomas that you always talked about visiting someday." She hesitated. "I wondered if you might want to meet me there. Not for long. Maybe just a few days." The invitation caught Callum completely off guard. St. Thomas had been a dream destination he'd mentioned during deployments, a fantasy of white beaches and clear water that had sustained him through desert warfare. "That's unexpected," he managed. "I know it's a lot to ask," Sophia rushed on. "And like I said, it's completely okay if you're not ready for that. I just thought, neutral territory. No memories there. No history to navigate." Callum studied his daughter's face, the mixture of hope and fear, courage and uncertainty. He recognized the tactical approach, choosing territory that carried no emotional landmines, offering a limited time frame, acknowledging his right to refuse. "I can't promise anything," he said finally. 4 months in Qatar may extend, depending on the situation. Of course, she nodded quickly. It was just a thought. But, he continued deliberately, if timing allows, I'd consider it. The smile that broke across her face was painfully familiar. The same expression she'd worn at 8, when successfully clearing her snorkel mask for the first time. Genuine, unguarded joy. That would be amazing, she said. Even if it doesn't work out, just knowing you'd consider it means a lot. As they parted outside the coffee shop, Sophia hesitated, then asked, "Can I hug you goodbye?" "It's okay if that's too much." Callum felt ancient defenses shift uncertainly. After a moment's consideration, he nodded once. Her embrace was brief, careful, not the exuberant tackles of her childhood, nor the dutiful motions before his deployment. Something new, tentative, but sincere. "Be safe in Qatar," she said, stepping back. "I'll send you updates from Belize if that's okay." "I'd like that," Callum replied, surprising himself with the truth of it. As he watched her walk away, Callum recognized something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Not forgiveness. He wasn't capable of that. Not reconciliation. Too much had been broken. But possibility, the space where new things might grow in the ruins of the old that existed. Small and fragile, but present. It was, he decided as he turned toward home, enough to begin with. Chapter 9. Steel and Silence. Qatar exceeded Callum's expectations professionally. The royal family's security concerns were legitimate and complex, requiring his full expertise. He built a team of 23 specialists, developed comprehensive protocols, and implemented cutting-edge systems. The 4-month contract extended to 6, then 8 as additional properties were added to his security portfolio. Elizabeth visited quarterly, each time expanding their scope and influence. Stone Ridge's reputation grew exponentially, with Callum's methodologies becoming the gold standard for high-risk protection in the region. "The Saudi royal family has approached us," Elizabeth informed him during her August visit. "They've offered a 3-year contract to overhaul their entire security infrastructure. 8 figures, Callum, plus equity partnerships in related ventures." They sat on the terrace of his company-provided villa, overlooking the Persian Gulf. Ranger dozed nearby, having adjusted perfectly to desert life. The dog's loyalty remained constant while everything else shifted. 3 years, Callum repeated, considering the implications. Significant commitment. Life-changing opportunity, Elizabeth corrected. "I'm prepared to offer you full partnership in Stone Ridge. Equal ownership, equal control." Callum raised an eyebrow. "You've built this company from nothing, Elizabeth. Why share control now?" "Because you've transformed what was possible," she replied simply. "I had a respectable firm before. Now we're redefining the industry. That deserves recognition." The offer was compelling, financially, professionally, strategically. It would also mean establishing a more permanent presence in the Middle East, further distance from his former life. "I need time to consider," he said finally. Elizabeth nodded, unsurprised. "Of course. We have 30 days before they require an answer." After she left, Callum sat watching the sunset paint the Gulf in shades of amber and gold. His phone chimed with a new message from Sophia, now a regular occurrence. She'd been sending updates from Belize, photographs of coral formations, excited descriptions of research breakthroughs, occasional personal reflections. Today's message was different. Research program ends next week. Still planning 2 weeks in the Caribbean after. St. Thomas offer still stands if your schedule allows. No pressure either way. Callum stared at the message, feeling conflicting impulses. The island meeting had remained a nebulous possibility throughout his time in Qatar, neither committed to nor dismissed. Now it required decision. 3 years in Saudi Arabia would mean definitively closing the door on whatever tentative reconnection had begun. It would be a statement, clear and unambiguous, that his past was truly past. Callum walked to the edge of the terrace, feeling the cooling evening breeze. In the distance, lights from oil platforms winked like earthbound stars. He'd rebuilt his professional life with precision and purpose. Stone Ridge offered a path forward that required no emotional risks, no vulnerability. The alternative, meeting Sophia, attempting some form of relationship, offered no such certainties. Only questions, complications, potential disappointments. Yet as he contemplated the Saudi option, Callum found himself remembering Griffin's words from Thanksgiving. Punishment without possibility of redemption isn't justice. It's just another form of war. He'd been at war since Yemen. First literally, then figuratively against Bradford and Brianna, finally against his own past. Perhaps it was time to consider, if not peace, then at least armistice. Callum typed his response. Arriving St. Thomas, August 25th. 3 days available before return to Qatar. Location details. Sophia's reply came almost immediately. Sapphire Beach on East End. Small villa rental. I'll send specifics. Really looking forward to this, Dad. The decision made, Callum felt strangely unburdened. Not optimistic, precisely. He'd lost the capacity for easy optimism in Yemen, but open to possibilities previously unimagined. He messaged Elizabeth. Need to schedule personal leave before Saudi decision. August 25th to 28th. Her response was characteristically direct. Noted. Travel safely. The Caribbean in late August was everything Callum had imagined during desert deployments. St. Thomas greeted him with lush vegetation, crystal waters, an air that tasted of salt and possibility. He'd traveled light, tactical habit, with only a small duffel and his ever-present situational awareness. The villa Sophia had rented exceeded his expectations. Perched on a hillside overlooking Sapphire Beach, it offered privacy, security, and breathtaking views. 2 separate bedroom suites with a shared living area provided appropriate space for their tentative reconnection. She was waiting on the terrace when his taxi arrived, tan from Belize, her smile nervous but genuine. You came, she said simply. I said I would, Callum replied, setting down his bag. You've said that before, she noted without accusation. Then deployments happened. The observation hung between them. Acknowledgement of broken promises neither had controlled. Different circumstances now, Callum said finally. I set my own schedule. Sophia nodded, then gestured toward the view. Worth the wait though, right? Just like you described. It was the precise shade of blue he'd held in his mind during the darkest moments in Yemen. Callum allowed himself a moment to absorb it before turning back to his daughter. You look well, he observed. Belize agreed with you. Changed everything, she confirmed enthusiastically. I've decided to specialize in marine conservation. Already talking to graduate programs. They settled into careful conversation. Sophia's research, Callum's security work, neutral territories that allowed reconnection without confronting still raw wounds. They prepared dinner together, discovering surprising ease in shared tasks requiring minimal conversation. As night fell, they sat on the terrace with glasses of local rum, watching stars emerge over the water. The silence between them had transformed from awkward to contemplative. I didn't think you'd come, Sophia admitted finally. I hoped, but I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't. I almost didn't, Callum replied honestly. What changed your mind? He considered the question carefully. Perspective. Distance from what happened. Sophia nodded slowly. I've been thinking a lot about that time. Try to understand my own choices. And I was terrified of losing everything, she said quietly. When they told us you were missing, it wasn't just losing my father. It was losing our home, our stability, our future. Nelson offered certainty when everything felt like quicksand. Callum remained silent, allowing her to continue. It doesn't excuse what happened when you came back, she acknowledged. That was unforgivable. But I want you to know it wasn't because I didn't love you or didn't miss you. It was because I was afraid of losing everything again. The explanation held elements of truth Callum recognized. Fear making rational people irrational, security overriding loyalty. He'd seen similar patterns in war zones, where survival instincts overwhelmed moral considerations. Understand fear, he said finally, better than you might think. They talked longer than either had anticipated, carefully navigating toward understanding without demanding forgiveness or absolution. When they finally retired to their separate rooms, something had shifted, not healed, but perhaps beginning to scar properly. The next 2 days unfolded with unexpected ease. They snorkeled together, Sophia's expertise now far exceeding the basics he'd taught her as a child. They hiked coastal trails, sharing comfortable silences punctuated by observations about marine life or security considerations, their respective passions. On the final evening, as sunset painted the sky in impossible colors, Sophia broached the subject they'd circled carefully for 3 days. "Mom asks about you sometimes," she said, watching his reaction. Not intrusively, just if you're okay. Callum kept his expression neutral. "And what do you tell her? That you seem to be building something new, that your work matters." Sophia hesitated. "She's seeing someone, a widower she met through her church. Nothing serious yet." "That's her business," Callum replied without inflection. "I know. I thought you should know. Thank you for telling me," he said, finding the information affected him less than expected. Brianna's life had become a separate reality, connected to his only through Sophia. "What about you?" she asked cautiously. "Is there anyone in Qatar?" Callum shook his head. "The work is all-consuming. And I'm not." He paused, seeking the right words. "I'm not built for that kind of trust anymore." Sophia nodded, understanding more than he'd intended to reveal. "The woman you mentioned, your business partner, you trust her. Professionally," Callum clarified. "That's different, is it? Seems like professional betrayal would be just as devastating in your line of work." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. Elizabeth had indeed earned his trust through proven reliability and shared purpose, qualities he'd once thought he'd found in Brianna. "It's calculated risk," he said finally. "Everything is." As darkness settled around them, Sophia asked the question he'd been anticipating since arriving. "What happens after this? Do we just go back to our separate lives?" Callum considered his response carefully. "I've been offered a 3-year contract in Saudi Arabia. Full partnership in Stone Ridge." 3 years, Sophia repeated, her voice carefully controlled. "That's a long time to be so far away." "It is," he acknowledged. "Are you taking it?" "I haven't decided." Callum turned to face her directly. "What would you prefer?" The question clearly surprised her. "My preference matters?" "I'm asking," he said simply. Sophia looked out over the darkened water, gathering her thoughts. "I'd prefer to have some kind of relationship with my father, even a distant, complicated one, even if it's just occasional messages and rare visits like this." She met his eyes steadily. "But I also understand if that's not possible for you." Her maturity, the absence of manipulation or entitlement, struck Callum forcefully. The calculating teenager he'd confronted 18 months ago had grown into something different. Not innocent or unblemished, but honest in her limitations and desires. "I can't be what I was before," he said finally. "That person doesn't exist anymore." "I know," Sophia nodded. "I'm not asking for that. I'm not asking for forgiveness either. Just possibility." Possibility. The word echoed his own thoughts from months ago. Not reconciliation, not restoration, but space for something new to potentially emerge. "I can offer that much," Callum decided. "Possibility, no promises beyond that." Sophia's smile was small but genuine. "That's enough. More than I expected, honestly." On his final morning, as Callum prepared to depart for the airport, Sophia handed him a small package wrapped in simple paper. "What's this?" he asked, momentarily suspicious of emotional manipulation. "Just something I thought you might want," she said. "Open it later, if you prefer." He tucked it into his bag with a nod of acknowledgement. Their goodbye was brief, without dramatic promises or emotional declarations. Just a simple exchange of contact information and tentative plans to message regularly. As his plane lifted off, Callum finally unwrapped the package. Inside was a waterproof case containing a flash drive and a handwritten note. "These are the photos and videos from before, in case you ever want to remember. They weren't all lies." In his Qatar apartment that evening, Callum inserted the drive into his laptop with military caution. It contained chronologically organized folders of family photographs and videos spanning 18 years, from Sophia's birth to his final deployment. Moments he'd lost when Brianna had refused him entry to their home. memories he deliberately burned during his campaign of retribution. He clicked through them methodically, watching his daughter grow from infant to child to teenager, watching himself transform from young father to seasoned warrior, watching Brianna age alongside him, their shared life documented in birthdays and Christmases and ordinary moments. The final video was dated 3 days before his deployment to Yemen. Sophia had recorded it secretly, Callum in the backyard teaching ranger commands, unaware of being filmed. His laugh, when the dog successfully completed a complex sequence, was unfamiliar to the man now watching, open, unguarded, belonging to someone who still believed in security and permanence. Callum closed the laptop, emotions carefully contained. The past captured in those images was irretrievable, destroyed by war, betrayal, and his own calculated vengeance. But something else remained possible, not restoration, but creation. Something new built on the foundations of hard-earned wisdom. He messaged Elizabeth, decision made on Saudi contract. Let's discuss details when I return. Then, after consideration, he messaged Sophia, arrived safely. Thank you for the photos. The time in St. Thomas was valuable. Her reply came minutes later. For me too. Safe travels back to Qatar. Let me know when you're settled in Saudi. Callum set down his phone, considering the choice he'd made. Not forgiveness. He remained incapable of that. Not reconciliation. Too much had been irreparably broken. But a future disconnected from the cycle of betrayal and retribution. A life built on strength without cruelty, boundaries without isolation, purpose without endless war. He would accept the Saudi contract and full partnership in Stone Ridge. Would build security systems protecting others from the vulnerabilities he'd experienced. Would maintain careful, limited contact with Sophia, not as the father he'd been, but as the man he'd become. Bradford remained destroyed, his predatory pattern exposed and neutralized. Brianna remained separate, navigating consequences of choices made. These outcomes Callum accepted without regret or reconsideration. But Sophia would have possibility. Limited, carefully constructed, but real. Not because Callum had forgiven betrayal, but because he'd chosen to end the war. As night settled over Qatar, Callum stood on his terrace watching distant lights. The man who'd returned from Yemen had sought destruction with surgical precision. The man who now contemplated the Persian Gulf sought something different. Not peace, precisely, but purpose beyond vengeance. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. But it was, perhaps, the beginning of something that could eventually become whole again. For now, that was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.